Hello, welcome to episode number 13. My name is Torsten Tausel. So today I have a couple things that have been kind of showing up that that would be interesting to talk about. One of my favorite topics is acknowledgement, and this came up recently in a conversation around actually a couple things. This last week I got a little sick. I had a bit of a head cold, still some lingering stuff, and two things that kind of came up with that. One was acknowledging what is, and also acknowledging what, in my case, was what my body required, and my body was just asking for rest. And so I ended up spending pretty much 2 days in bed, which for me is not something I really enjoy doing. I find it really boring to be in bed for that long. I like to be active even if it's not that active. And what was interesting was also this, with that being this space of allowance for myself to do that, to give, kind of give my body the space to rest and to do whatever it requires. And that's something that I wasn't super excited about. Spending days in bed is not really fun for me. And so, but having the allowance of my body for it to be able to choose that and not make it wrong was interesting. And actually, when I started really looking at that and asking some more questions around that, that's when things actually shifted for me. So that was interesting. It's interesting what questions can do. The other thing was this acknowledgement, and I've talked about it quite a bit now, is this what's right about me that I'm not getting? And it's a question that you can really ask yourself. And I have been asking that, and it came up again. And so in this one exercise that I was asked to do was to actually say 5 things that were right about me. And I really encourage you to do this, to give this a try. Because I got to 1 thing. No, I think I might have almost gotten to 2. And then I basically went blank. It kind of stopped there. And I'm like, seriously, I gotta do like 3 more of these? There aren't any. Like literally, I'm done at 2. And it was really interesting to just do that process, just to say these 5 things out loud, which for whatever reason in my world was not something that came with any ease whatsoever. It came with a lot of resistance and a lot of blankness. And it was amazing how little, in doing this, it was amazing to me how little acknowledgement I have had for myself. And or to acknowledge me to me. And it's not doing it to or for anyone else. It was just an acknowledgement of me acknowledging myself, which is something that I realize I don't do that much, and clearly was struggling with coming up with 5 things. I did get there in the end, and But it took a while to actually look at that and to realize how unwilling, I guess, it would be to go there. And kind of little interruption again. What's interesting about this is just looking at the whole thing that came up around it, like the whole resistance to acknowledgement. And I don't know if anyone else has had this. I'm aware of other people that are extremely good at acknowledging others, may not be so forthcoming to acknowledge themselves. And it's really amazing how quick we are to, like, even in doing this exercise, even in doing the 5 things, I'm like, oh, can I just give you 5 things that I'm not good at? Because I can give you like a list of 10 things like in a second. And so it was really this place of the willingness. What I became aware of was the willingness in my world to go to the wrongness, and that was super easy. In fact, that was automatic. And to not automatically go there and go somewhere else where I am aware I obviously don't choose very often. And it's not that there isn't anything there. It's literally not looking at that. And maybe looking at it, but not actually acknowledging what is there. And what's so interesting, what I realize is what that creates. Like it created something different in the moment, and also, as things aren't linear, yet we are all connected, it also created something else. And what I realized was this, there's suddenly more space, in the sense of there's more space of I think the biggest thing is when intensity shows up. There's more space for intensity in my world. And when it shows up, I just kind of look at it and am willing to see it for what it is, and also just look at it and I guess in the way a lot of people would term it, is not react to it, or just be aware of what is. And also with that is then acknowledging what is in the world or in your world showing up. And it's really that being that space of allowance and being that space of no point of view, where you see things show up, you're like, huh, that's interesting. And you're aware of the intensity, and there can be a lot of intensity with it, and it just doesn't have an effect. Where you're like, huh, I'm aware of that intensity, I'm aware of the directed intensity, and it's just there. And it's really not buying any story that anything is significant at all. And it's so it's funny because those 2 things may not seem related, yet I'm aware that that's what part of that has created in my world. And it's interesting to just to see that, and just to see, huh, by having this willingness to acknowledge what is in me, it actually creates more ease to acknowledge what is that shows up in my life around me. And what's interesting is that even, I would say, a couple months ago, that was very different. It was really different in the sense that whenever intensity did show up, it would be super uncomfortable. And now it's not as uncomfortable, I guess, in the sense that it's there and you acknowledge it's there. It's not like it has disappeared. It still shows up. What's different is it just doesn't have any control. And that's really what's so amazing about acknowledging yourself. And there's another aspect of this too, was so as in part of this conversation, there was also, I was looking at something where I was stopping myself, essentially stopping creating. And in that conversation, which I really would love to share more of, but the words are just not there. But basically what showed up for me was that somewhere along the line, I had bought a lie, which isn't uncommon, but it was interesting in the way that we do things and how we, over time, basically create these situations that we aren't fully aware that we're doing to ourselves, and then holding these things in place that don't actually allow us to be ourselves. And in this particular situation, I was really actually amazed how good of a job I was able to do, or how good I was at keeping that limitation in place, and almost like having that limitation, but it not showing up, or like hiding that it is a limitation. And it was really interesting as I became aware of this. What's amazing is we do this often. This isn't the first time I've been aware of this in my own world, so I know that if I've done it a few times, everyone's done it, a few times for sure. And when you start uncovering that, you actually start seeing the brilliance of you in a way that how brilliant you are at stopping yourself, at basically keeping yourself limited and keeping yourself part of this reality and not allowing yourself to go beyond this reality. And so it was really interesting to see in that way, like just actually how brilliant we are at creating limitation in our world. And how we buy that as real when it's just something that we bought somewhere along the way. And it's still like, when I look at it now, it is like, we don't realize how brilliant we are. We just focus on the ways that we aren't brilliant or think we aren't brilliant, and then make that our reality, which is so far from the truth. It is so far from what is actually real and what is actually true in our world. And the other thing that I was looking at too, with all this showing up, was if you were willing to go totally beyond this reality. And I know those words have been used a lot, And what does that actually mean? Well, one thing that kind of I became aware of the other day was this thing where I know a lot of people do this when they're starting to create something new, or they have some creation or an idea or something like that. They'll look at this reality to see how people do it in this reality. And which is great because it can give you information. The thing is, most people don't use it as information. They use it as a way to mimic. And in Access, there's a body process called biomimetic mimicry, and where you basically mimic your family often, or friends, or whatever. And it's really how people live in this world and function in this world, is you look at what someone else is doing and then you try to make it yours, which actually never works. And so what if you actually took whatever it is that you knew, and it may even be something completely ridiculous because in this world, in this reality, it doesn't fit, it doesn't make any sense, and then you just kind of go with it. And it's really interesting when you start looking at it from that place. So like, if you were to create something way beyond this reality, what would you choose? I'd love to expand into the dimensions these days. Cool. It's like, and what if you could expand, beyond dimensions? What if you could expand beyond realities? What if you could expand beyond universes? What if you could expand beyond you? What would show up then? And it's like, what I became aware of in this moment was, what if you had ideas, and what if you actually knew how to create beyond this reality, but you've never chosen it because no one else is doing it? And that's where you stop. You literally stop because you look around the world for something like what you're aware of, and it isn't actually there. And it isn't actually there because it hasn't been created yet. And it hasn't been created in the way that you know is possible. And it's really about this, not looking at this world as a reference of what is possible, instead looking at what you know and going, okay, so what do I have to do to create this? What, in my world, what do I have to change to actualize what I know is possible? And start looking at it from that way. I think one of the people who does this on a pretty large scale, in looking at this world in a different way, and looking to create what they know is true to them, is Elon Musk. He really looks at certain things and he doesn't look at it from this reality. And he uses this reality to his advantage all the time. And when he starts looking at things, he functions in a completely different way. And it's interesting when you see all the different businesses that he has going. And I mean, he's got one, the Boring Company, which kind of started as a joke. Well, it's really expanding into something else right now. And it's interesting to see where it goes. And a lot of people say, well, he's got too many things going on from a business standpoint, the way he runs his business, it's not sustainable. But he doesn't function from this reality. He doesn't look at business the way that people do business. He looks at it in a completely different way. And most people don't get that. He is a total humanoid. He's got 10 million different things going on at the same time. And people in this reality look at it and go, that's wrong because he's spreading himself too thin. If he just focused on one thing, he'd be okay. Well, he wouldn't be, because he'd get really bored. And that one thing that he was creating wouldn't create in a way that it could, because it was being limited to only him being able to do that one thing. And an example of this is technology that he uses in Tesla cars. Some of his technology came from his company SpaceX. And so they actually contribute to each other. And we always look at the world in a way that it's really limited. And we never look at, well, what if you have many different things going on and all of them contribute to each other, that they're not actually separate? And this is actually how Elon really functions in many ways. He's actualized it in this reality, in the way he does things. It doesn't make sense to everyone. And there's a lot of people that can't see what he's doing and can't see how he creates, because they don't create that way. In fact, very few people create the way he creates. And that's what makes the way he does things in this world amazing, because he doesn't look at this reality as a way to create. He looks at it in a completely different way and looks at, like, okay, so what can I do to go beyond this? And I'm not waiting for somebody to show up and do this with me. I'm just going to go do it. And he doesn't allow himself to stop himself. And he's been almost bankrupt numerous times and has been able to continue and make it through. So he's willing to lose it all, essentially. And so there's all these things that, what if you were willing to just lose everything and not function from this reality, and look at what you know and what you know is possible, and see what it would take to actualize that in this world? Oh, who am I talking about? Elon Musk is who I was talking about. And so it's really interesting when you start looking at this, looking at what you want to create in the world. What is it that you are aware of? What is it that you are aware of that doesn't actually exist yet? Whatever that may be. And in this 10 seconds, it might just be an energy. It might just be something that you're aware of, something that you are aware of, and something that you can perceive in an energetic state that has information that is information to you, but there's nothing more than that. There's just this energy, this information of energy. And what if you could actualize that into something in this reality that would change this reality? It's really the contribution that we are, that each of us are, that contribute to creating a different reality than we currently have. Because really, when you look at this reality in a whole, it's as a whole, as the earth and so on, it's a little messed up right now. And really something has to change. It can't continue the way we've been doing things. It isn't sustainable. It isn't something that will create more in this world. This world is about creating less at the moment, and it's very much about destruction. And destruction isn't a bad thing. It's just if you only do destruction, not creation, you will just end up destroying. It's really it's really that simple. And so what else is possible? And what other creations are possible that haven't come into existence, haven't come into actualization? And what if you were one of those creations, or you were part of many of these creations of doing something different? Because I know for me that something else is possible in this world. I know that this world can be completely different than it currently is. And if there was one thing that I would acknowledge about myself, is that when I am aware of that that I can make different choices to choose more or choose less, to me, there is no choice then. Because the choice is so obvious. To choose more, why wouldn't I choose it? And I get that isn't a question. And I also get that when that space becomes available, when I'm aware of that energy, that something will create more, I will choose it. Whatever that looks like, however that shows up. And the other thing was, when I was looking at all this of what I do want to create, I also realized it doesn't matter actually to me how it looks. I know a lot of people get into access and they want to do it in a way that is access, which is great. It's amazing. And what if it looked completely different? What if you creating the world in a different way was something completely different? And maybe it didn't have anything to do with access at all. Maybe it just had to do with it had to do with your awareness of how more could show up in this world and how many different ways it can look like, and playing with those different ways. And it's really not having a point of view of what it's supposed to look like. It's literally like, I am interested in creating something different. I'm interested in creating more in the world. And I'm aware that it can show up in so many different ways. And so that's really what is interesting to me. And not only interesting to me, I know that there's many, many other people out there that have a similar desire. It may not be the same as mine, but it's kind of like this common goal to some degree. It's basically the idea of the oneness that we are. There's so many people that are ready for something else. They're ready for something else to change. And what if that change looked completely different? What if you actually did something completely different that actually brought that about? And so that's really what I've been looking at in the questions. And what if, instead of thinking that you can't create anything different, ask yourself 5 things. What's right about me that I'm not getting? 5 things that are right about you, to create a different space in your world. And to realize, you know what? I might actually be part of that difference. And if I only acknowledged it or started with the acknowledgement of it, then something completely different can show up. So ask those questions to yourself and see what changes in your world. And let me know what changes in your world. And thank you so much for watching and playing. And we'll do this again next week. Awesome. Bye, everyone.